Hey, curious minds, welcome back to EverCurious. Today we dive into one of history's most enduring mysteries, the man in the iron mask. Who was this prisoner? What crime did he commit? And why was his face hidden for decades? Over the next 15 minutes, we'll walk through the clues, the legends, and the most credible theories, and maybe, just maybe, we'll inch closer to the truth. Imagine.
EverCurious, learn what you love.
Truth. Imagine a man arrested in 1669, held in complete secrecy across multiple prisons in France, wearing a mask so no one could see his face. Rumors swirl that he was a royal twin, or a disgraced noble or valet with a dangerous secret. For centuries, people have speculated, argued, and written novels about him. Today, we'll sift through the legends and the facts. Are you ready? Let's unmask the mystery. First, let's lay down what we do know. The man in the iron mask, French, l'homme au masque de fer, was a prisoner of state in Louis XIV's France who died in 1703 in the Bastille. He was arrested in July of 1669, some sources say between July 28 and August, under the name Eustache Dauger. He was kept under extraordinarily secret conditions. No communication except for his basic needs. No one allowed to see his face, or so the legend goes. Over 34 years, he was transferred through at least 4 prisons: Pignerol, in what is today Italy, Exiles, the Îles Sainte Marguerite, and finally the Bastille. At his death on November 19, 1703, he was buried under the name Mattioli, an alias, in the parish cemetery of St. Paul in Paris. So the baseline is solid. Real person, real prisoner, real secrecy. The trouble is, nobody knows definitively who was. That's where the theories begin. Let's imagine what life was like for this prisoner. The secrecy was extreme. His cell often had multiple doors and was placed such that any noise or cry would be muffled or unheard. For much of his incarceration, official documents show he was referred to only as the old prisoner or ancien prisonnier. He wasn't permitted to speak to anyone except to request basic necessities like food or water, or else face fatal consequences. The mask itself is a big piece of the mystery. While the legend claims it was made of iron, historians now believe the real mask, if there was ever one worn, was made of black velvet and only applied when the prisoner might be seen by others, such as when he was taken to mass or moved between prisons. Why such secrecy? Because someone, somewhere believed this prisoner held dangerous knowledge or represented a threat if his identity were revealed. That's what we'll explore in the coming sessions. A key figure in this saga is Benny d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, the prison governor who essentially carried the masked prisoner from prison to prison over decades. Saint-Mars served as governor first in Pignerolo, until 1681, then Exiles, then the islands of Sainte Marguerite, and finally he became governor of the Bastille itself in 1698. Remarkably, wherever Saint-Mars went, the masked prisoner followed. Letters from Saint-Mars to his superiors, especially Louvois, Louis XIV's war minister, show he was very protective of this prisoner, sometimes exaggerating the prisoner's importance to enhance his own prestige. He once admitted to inventing rumors about the prisoner's identity just to stir speculation. So Saint-Mars is more than a background guard, he's an active player in how the legend was shaped. His control of access, his exaggeration, and his strict secrecy all help fuel the mystery. The story of the man in the iron mask became immortal in literature. 2 names loom large: Voltaire and Alexandre Dumas. In the 18th century, Voltaire proposed the prisoner was the older, secret brother of Louis XIV. He speculated that the mask was needed to suppress recognition. That idea caught fire. Then, in the 19th century, Dumas expanded the legend in his novels, notably the Vicomte de Bragelonne, by making the masked man a twin brother of Louis XIV, locked away to preserve royal stability. In Dumas's version, the mask is iron, the prisoner is regal, and the intrigue spans swashbuckling adventure. The popular versions often deviate wildly from historical records. But literature matters. These stories shaped public imagination. They also planted ideas that later historians had to push back against. In fact, serious scholars today discard the idea that the mask was solid iron or that the prisoner was royalty, but to understand the legacy, we must traverse the legend first. One of the most seductive theories. The prisoner was a secret twin of King Louis XIV. According to Voltaire, and echoed by Dumas, the co-twin was hidden away at birth and imprisoned to avoid dynastic chaos. This version appeals to drama, a hidden royal, masked and silenced, but the evidence is extremely weak. No contemporary documents ever support a twin birth. No official record, no birth certificate, no mention from the royal family. Historians regard this as imaginative fiction rather than credible fact. Also, the iron mask, as popularly imagined, is likely a later embellishment. There is no solid evidence of an iron mask in primary documents, only references to a mask or covering. So while this twin theory is dramatic and memorable, it lacks strong historical grounding. It tells us more about the power of myth than the truth of the past. Now let's go to a more historically grounded theory that the masked man was Eustache Dauger, or Danger, a valet employed by powerful men. This is currently one of the most accepted candidates. In his research, historian Paul Sonnino argues there's broad agreement that the prisoner's name was Dauger, and that he sometimes wore a velvet mask, not a permanent iron one. The key mystery: whose valet was he, and what did he know? Some suggest he worked for the treasurer of Cardinal Mazarin, figures involved in massive financial dealings and secrets. One idea is Dauger may have discovered illicit transfers or had knowledge dangerous to powerful men. The theory goes, he blabbed at the wrong time, or his silence was enforced to protect higher interests. This theory has appeal because it fits the secrecy. A valet is low status, likely overlooked, but capable of knowing things behind the scenes. And it doesn't require invoking phantom twins or royal conspiracies. Still, it cannot be proven conclusively. Another serious candidate is Ercole Antonio Mattioli, an Italian diplomat. In 1678, he negotiated the fortress of Casale with Louis XIV, only to betray the deal by revealing it to other courts. Some suggest that Louis punished his betrayal by having him abducted and imprisoned. The problem is that records indicate Mattioli died on Isle Sainte Marguerite in about 1694, while the masked prisoner remained alive until 1703. Also, when Saint Mars moved from one prison to another, the masked prisoner always followed, Mattioli did not. Thus, although Mattioli has intrigue and motive, timing and records make it unlikely. Still, he remains one of the few plausible non-fictional candidates, especially in older scholarship. Beyond the main candidates, several fringe or speculative theories exist. James de la Cloche, alleged illegitimate son of Charles II of England. In the early 20th century, some writers argued the masked man was this James. Marcel Pagnol's Le Secret du Masque de Fer revisits this theory. Rue du Marcilly, a plotter against Louis XIV. Some theories connect the masked man with Rue's conspiracy. Other names floated over centuries: Duke of Beaufort, Cromwell's descendants, various nobles. The problem with many of these is lack of consistent contemporary evidence. Many are post-factum speculations, later romanticizations or attempts to fit the masked man into a dramatic narrative. Historical method demands documentary proof, and most of these candidates fail on that count. How do modern historians approach this mystery now? Enter Paul Sonnino, author of The Search for the Man in the Iron Mask, and historians like Josephine Wilkinson. They largely reject Voltaire's and Dumas's dramatic claims, regarding them as legend rather than fact. For instance, Sonnino and others argue that the mask was velvet, not iron, and worn only when necessary, not as a permanent cover. Sonnino employs what he calls radical empiricism. He examines primary documents like letters from Saint Mars to Louvois, orders from Louis XIV's ministers, and prison registers. From this, he builds a circumstantial case that Dauger is the strongest candidate, though he admits uncertainty. Wilkinson, in her book The Man in the Iron Mask, The Truth About Europe's Most Famous Prisoner, also critiques prior overreach and supports the idea the prisoner was less glamorous than legends. One important point: historians emphasize that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we have no smoking gun doesn't mean a theory is false, but it must rest on stronger foundations than myth. In short, the masked man likely wasn't a royal twin, but someone whose identity intersected power, secrecy, and danger. So after all that, what is our verdict? Which theory is most plausible? Based on the weight of evidence, the theory that the masked man was Eustache Dauger, a valet, appears strongest. It aligns with archival correspondence, the conditions imposed, the lack of royal documentation, and the emphasis on secrecy rather than overt drama. The twin brother theory, while dramatic, is weak on documentary support. Ercole Mattioli has motive, but the timeline doesn't fit well. Other theories are more speculative and lack solid footing. That said, no one yet has conclusive proof. The masked man's identity remains officially unresolved. But what we do gain is a better understanding of how secrecy, power, and narrative shape history. The legend of the Iron Mask may say more about how we construct mysteries than about who the man really was. If I were to bet, my money's on Eustache Dauger being the most credible, though with humility. This is a mystery that may never be fully solved. Alright folks, we've walked through centuries of mystery, myth, and historical detective work. The Man in the Iron Mask remains one of the most enticing enigmas in European history. What fascinates me is not just who he was, but why we care so much. We love secrets, we love hidden identities. We project drama onto the unknown. In trying to unmask him, we also reflect on how we craft stories about power, legacy, and anonymity. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to EverCurious for more untold mysteries, history's puzzles, and curious stories from around the world. Also, let me know in the comments. Which theory do you believe? The valet? The royal twin? Someone else entirely? I'd love to hear your take, and maybe a future video will explore your idea. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking the questions history doesn't always answer.